Brief devotional message this week. This month, the month of September, we have been preaching through a series on anger. And at the beginning of the series, I told the congregation that I wanted us to look at anger because we are an angry country right now. We're an angry society. We are angry because of all the pandemic restrictions that have been going on a lot longer than we anticipated. And there are some on one side saying that this pandemic is contrived, that it's just there, put into place for political purposes, and it's not real. Whereas there are the others on the other side saying, well, if this is contrived, then the entire world is in on it. But we're angry because of these restrictions. Likewise, we're angry because of the racial unrest going on all around us. And again, there are those on one side saying that systemic racism is not real. It's just something that has been made up by people of color to receive preferential treatment. Whereas on the other side of that argument are people saying that if systemic racism is not embedded into the DNA of this country, then why are black people 2.5 times more likely to be killed by police officers than white people? They would say, why are investigations done internally as opposed to being done by independent investigators? But we're angry because of the racial tensions. We're also angry because of all the political tensions, which is just going to amp up even as we get even closer to this election in November. But we are an angry nation. We're an angry people, and too often we who claim to be followers of Christ are contributing to the anger. But as followers of Christ, we have to be different. We have got to respond differently. We've got to respond better than everyone else around us. The last Sunday of September, as we conclude this series on anger, we looked at the story of Jonah, because in that story, God challenges Jonah to look at his own anger. And there's twice within the last chapter of Jonah where God questions Jonah. He says, "Do you have a right to be angry, Jonah?" And what God is saying or asking if he has a right to be angry about is the way that the Assyrians had treated Israel as they came in and overtook them. And from a human perspective, you'd say, yeah, Jonah's got a right to be angry because the Assyrians were brutal. They were cruel. They would behead their people that they conquered, behead a lot of people, put their heads on poles, and make the family members and friends of that beheaded person carry those poles in a parade honoring the Assyrians. They would dismember people holding one hand while shaking it, while at the same time severing their other hands as a way of taunting them. They would stretch people tight with ropes and then skin them alive. They would burn children alive, and then they employed a scorched earth policy. So when they left an area, they would burn the land, making it almost uninhabitable for people. That they were a horrible, brutal, cruel people. And God asked Jonah, do you have a right to be mad about how these people have treated you? And in human terms, we'd say, yeah, he had every right. But twice when God asks him, do you have to be a right? Do you have a right to be angry? The implied answer from God is no. You don't have a right to be angry about this. And why would that be? Why would God insinuate that Jonah had no right to be angry? The reason I want to suggest to us is because the way people who identify themselves as being on God's side, as Jonah would have identified himself as being on God's side, that people who say that they're on God's side, they are to view other people, especially their enemies, to be, that the way that we view people who are our enemies is got to be rooted in the character of God. We have to see people and to treat people based upon them being made in the image of God. If we have any chance to be slow to get angry, if we have any chance to get through this pandemic, to get through this racial unrest, to get through this election season without destroying ourselves, and when I say ourselves, I mean Christians. If we have any hope of getting through this time of unrest and pandemic and racial tension and political turmoil without destroying ourselves and without creating a bad witness on behalf of Christ, then we have to primarily see our enemies as being made in the image of God and loved by him as much as he loves us. And so I want to encourage us that as from now and through the month of November, to take fasts from media and to fast from social media, to not allow that to be your perspective, the filter through which you are influenced in how you see people. And I want to encourage us to pray, that you would pray and ask the Holy Spirit to enable you to see your enemies as being made in the image of God.